Hi, my name is Terry Davis. I'm with the Enchantment Awards. I guess that's kind of obvious, isn't it? In all this. I want to talk to you about a trick I use when I'm learning my lines. Um, I think it's best to do this after the show's been blocked or after you've had the table work done. That's where you sit at the table and talk about the show and whose story it is, what the story is, what your characters are doing, that sort of thing. You might get table work from your director in other ways. Some directors don't necessarily do table work, but they work it into the rehearsal process in other ways. It's possible that you might be asked to have your lines learned before the first rehearsal. That's unusual in high school theater, but not at all unusual in professional theater. That means you can still use this technique I'm talking about, by the way, but you means all the mental work, all the analysis will come from you. This process entails figuring out why you're saying the lines, what motivational and emotional logic applies to bring your character to say the things he or she is saying. It also gets at the intention of your character in that moment. What does your character want right now? As you sort all this out, you'll be learning your lines. Now, we all know that characters have motivations, right? Juliet wants to marry Romeo and live a life happily ever after without all this family feud nonsense. Tracy Turnblad wants to integrate the Corny Collins show in Hairspray, at least at first for her plus-sized self and then for her black friends, all of whom can dance really well, but they're getting told that they don't really look like they belong on TV. Characters have specific motivations in specific scenes and use different tactics to accomplish those sub-motivations. In Act 2, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet, the scene I hope you have read through a couple of times. When Juliet asks her nurse if she's gotten the news from Romeo about a possible wedding, her motivation moves to specific moment-to-moment, that task of getting the news out of the nurse. And the nurse, of course, is teasing her by withholding it. She first gets impatient, and then she flatters, and then she pleads. Each of those is a verbal action. Let's break this down. Now, I'm not going to play Juliet. Sorry to disappoint you. I'm going to direct you through this process, okay? All right, we're going to start following Peter's exit, okay? Now, first, you have to know this. Every line in a script is propelled by emotion. The characters in a drama, or even a comedy, have a lot at stake. This is a highly emotional scene for Juliet. She has a lot at stake here. She has sent her nurse to find out if she can sneak away to marry Romeo. Her nurse has returned and she's impatient for that news. Given the tension between her family and Romeo's, well, that's a problem. And she loves Romeo, but she doesn't really know what his intentions are. She's just really met him, of course. And so the nurse could easily be bringing back bad news. If you've read through the soliloquy at the top of the scene, you're going to get a really clear sense of her desires and her fears. Her first words after Peter leaves. Now, good sweet nurse. That's an address, of course. She's addressing the nurse. But it's also the start of her supplication, her plea. Then she sees the nurse's face. She has to, of course, in order to say, "Oh Lord, why lookest thou sad?" So there's an action. By the end of Now Good Sweet Nurse, Juliet has to see the nurse's face. And the nurse, of course, will have to look sad or look in such a way that Juliet can interpret it as being sad. So there's her line, "O Lord, why lookest thou sad?" And that is filled with emotion. The nurse's sad expression could be doom for Juliet and everything that she wants. Now you have another action. Expressing that fear for the worst, expressing that dread. All right, within the first 10 words now of this specific scene, you have two actions so far, at least two. How you express that physically can vary quite a bit. Maybe you start the scene, right? Are you starting at a distance from the nurse? And then you move toward her. If you do that, are you moving quickly toward her? And if you do come in close, are you coming in at the same level with the nurse? You know, your head's Do you move to your knees to be lower than the nurse? Perhaps the better to see her face or to plead into that face, if you will. Is there another set of actions that would work for you here better than what I'm describing? Um, if this has been staged or blocked already, then you've already got your motions, but you can now add your emotions and motivations behind those lines and those movements to make them more honest, to make them more true to the moment. Even if you haven't blocked dropping to your knees in the scene, you can still get your face into the nurses from a lower angle to play that, if that works for what you're doing. All right, try that line. Now, good sweet nurse, oh Lord, why lookest thou sad? Try that line with your actions, either the ones we've developed here or the ones you're working on. Go. Did you feel that the movement helped the line? Motion helps illustrate emotion. Try it again. Don't be afraid of the emotion. Put that into it. Try the line. Go. All right. Now, with her next 3 lines, Juliet doesn't let the nurse answer her question. She's asked a question. She doesn't let the nurse answer. Why lookest thou sad? And blows right past it. She's playing out the possible endings here that the nurse could be bringing back to her some news, but doesn't let the nurse get any words in edgewise. So how quickly is she speaking? That's another possible action for you, see? Talking fast. So try those next 3 lines. A hint, by the way, news is plural here in Shakespeare's time. So Juliet refers to the news as them, yet tell them merrily. It's as though we would say, yet tell it merrily, because for us, news is singular. When you read yet tell them merrily, hear it as yet tell it merrily. Okay, does that make sense? All right, try it. How did that contrast with the first line you read? Was it a different tempo? Was it read with different emotion? Does it move in your face and body differently than it did before? You've got to pay attention to those differences and how those things move. Right now, the nurse is likely already teasing her with her first line, right? Juliet can't see this, like whatever. That's an action to play as a reaction to the nurse's line, of course, and you always want to have a reaction going. And it helps you, if you know what the reaction is, you can follow the path into your own next line. Juliet answers back by saying we should give the nurse her own bones in exchange for the news. And there can be a little more than a little impatience in that response. Now, as Juliet says, I pray thee, she's pleading again, right? But you got to raise that up a notch. If she's pleading again, you don't want to plead the same way you did the first time. We always have to move a scene forward. It has to have raised stakes. Scenes always have ticking clocks behind them. What that means is that there's a certain set of time, a time set that everything has to happen in. And now we've wasted some time over here. We have less time to get this done. The ticking clock has put more pressure on this. Try now this full line. I would thou hadst through good nurse speak. Did you find 2 different actions in the 2 different sentences? The first sentence is a declaration. The second is the plea, right? 2 different actions. Try it again. Make sure you're really clear that those are different. So now the nurse teases Juliet again. Why? She doesn't even have the breath to speak, poor dear. Well, Juliet sees right through that, snaps back at her. Her response is really kind of funny. How art thou out of breath when thou hast breath to say to me that thou art out of breath? Which is kind of a long line to spit out all in one breath. So Juliet will likely have to take a breath after spitting all that out, right? Try the line, make sure you take a breath after the line. So that'll be incorporated in what you're doing in the reading. Read the line, take the breath, go. Does it kind of feel funny? I mean, comic funny? It should, even if it's only a little funny. Now, the bigger the breath, the funnier it might feel. Try it again with a really big breath. Go. Now, you can play it that way. That's up to you and the director. Even if you do, you have to play it honestly. Juliet really needs that breath at that point. But you might also choose to say, well, you know, this isn't the comedy of errors, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to go there. That's fine. You can still take the breath. You probably have to do that. But try it now as a transition to the next line. Reading lines 30 through 33, take the breath as if Juliet is trying to compose herself. Does that make sense? Okay, go. That first line about the breath forces the action, taking the breath, which can be used as a reaction to the line or as a transition to the next line, or both, really. The action implicated in the line gives you the specific action to take, taking the breath, which you have to deal with as your response to the nurse, okay? But it also allows Juliet to settle herself before entreating her nurse again. Doing both those things with that moment allows you to play both simultaneously. The frustration expressed in lines 30 and 31, as well as the regaining of control in lines 32 and 33. All right, now, try Juliet's lines, Peter's exit, through longer than the tale thou dost excuse. Listen for the nurse's lines. Maybe react as though you're hearing them. But try Juliet's lines with the actions we found, or the actions you found. Ready? Go. Do you have the lines almost memorized now? Remember, that was what we're going to do at the outset of this, right? This is a memorization trick. All right. It may not be obvious to you that you've really kind of got the lines pretty close, but like I said, you probably have a pretty good start on them. By adding the physical to the recitation of the lines, you're adding physical memory to the mental memorization process. You make that easier to retain then in your mind. You're also upping the game on the scene itself, driving the scene with the emotions and the actions and so forth. And by the time you've finished memorizing your lines, you'll also be better at the scene. Now that means the first time you have to go off book, this will all be less stressful. Why? Because you're not just relying on your mental memory, you have physical and emotional memory helping you get through that process. Now, by the way, once you've learned your lines and got them all memorized, if you have to change an emotion or change an action in a scene because you and the director have figured out, hey, that's not working, it's okay. You can do this because it's a three-legged stool here, right? You've got mental memorization, you've got emotional memorization, you've got physical memorization. Now we're going to take and change the blocking. Okay, so we're going to take this out for a moment. You still have these two helping you. Change the blocking, and now there it is, right? Maybe do this blocking 2 or 3 times just to get it into your body, but there it is, it's back. And I hope this helps you, right? Thanks for trying it.